My name is Allison Keene, and I'm here with the Health Connector, and I'm going to take you through the couple of sections here, the overview of ACA changes to Health Connector plans and products section. So hopefully everyone has the materials in front of them, and just to walk through at a high level what our agenda is going to be for today, for this section at least, we'll go through sort of ACA changes to the health insurance market in Massachusetts generally, ACA changes specifically to the Health Connector, the certification of Health Connector products and plans, so just a little bit about our process for that, and then kind of what some of our products and plans are as well. So we'll end all of that, as you've been familiar with from the other sections, with an assessment and summary, and we'll also make sure to leave some time at the end if you have any questions, which I'm more than happy to take. So I'll go ahead and jump right in. Just to kind of touch on some of the objectives of this section, the first one is really just to get you familiar with the changes that are happening in the Massachusetts health insurance market, of which there are, as you know, many, as a result of the Affordable Care Act. The second one is to kind of make sure that you understand what the definition and requirements are for plans that we call qualified health plans and qualified dental plans, which are offered on the Health Connector. And lastly, to look at some of the specific QHPs and QDPs, as we call them, that are offered through the Health Connector. So as I said, the first section, we're just going to kind of think about the changes to the health insurance market in Massachusetts broadly. And the first slide there is really just looking at what the changes are to the sources of coverage in Massachusetts, and really looking specifically at some of the things that have changed before ACA implementation, which is before 1/1/2014, and then after ACA implementation, after 1/1/2014. So if we think about how the ACA affects where individuals, families, and small businesses, which is really the group that we're focused on here at the Health Connector, changes to how they purchase their health insurance in Massachusetts, there are a couple of changes in sources of coverage. So for the subsidized set, there's some changes to the Children's Medical Security Plan, as well as the DUA, Division of Unemployment Assistance, sources of coverage. So before ACA implementation, folks could get subsidized coverage through the Children's Medical Security Plan. This is still true actually after ACA implementation. However, the CMSP will not actually meet minimum essential coverage. So if you have coverage through that, you would actually potentially be subject to a penalty. The Division of Unemployment Assistance Insurance, that one will no longer exist after ACA implementation 1/1/2014. Obviously, the next biggest source of subsidized coverage, Mass Health, clearly exists both before and after. We'll talk through some of the differences in who's eligible for that, and some of the population that is currently with the Health Connector will be going to Mass Health, and there's some movement and transition there. And then for unsubsidized coverage, there are really three sources. There's obviously the Health Connector. There are various intermediaries other than the Health Connector. And then there's additionally directly from carriers. So individuals and small businesses can go directly to a carrier like Blue Cross Blue Shield or Harvard Pilgrim or NHP and just purchase their coverage there. So kind of diving in a little bit on the changes to subsidy eligibility on the next slide. There's a lot of changes here, and it can be a little bit confusing to keep track of them. So we wanted to sort of split out, at least for the population that's in the Health Connector and in Mass Health, what this looks like. So if you kind of start at the bottom of this chart here in the blue section, individuals and families with incomes less than 133% of the federal poverty level are now eligible for Mass Health. So you see them, they are in that blue box, Mass Health Standard, Mass Healthcare Plus. In the yellow box that's just surrounding that, you see individuals and families that are under 300% of the federal poverty level. These were typically people who were in Commonwealth care previously. It now includes the lawfully present ages 21 plus, the A-list population, all the way down to 0%. Everyone else in that group should be above 133% and below 300%, because those folks who are not A-list, who are under 133%, would be in Medicaid. For the people who are under 300% FPL, who were previously in Commonwealth care plans, they'll now be in what we call connector care plans, which incorporate, as I think you probably already know, cost sharing reductions, premium tax credits, and additional state subsidies. These plans look very much like Commonwealth Care looks today. So in terms of the amount of cost sharing and also the enrollee premium contribution and requirements, this is what you are probably used to from ComCare. And finally, one big change under the ACA is between 300 and 400% of the federal poverty level. Folks are now eligible to receive federal premium tax credits there. So these people typically before ACA implementation would have received no subsidy. Now they can purchase a QHP on the Health Connector and receive a premium tax credit. So turning to the next slide, looking at some of the changes to MassHealth eligibility, and certainly the folks from MassHealth in the room should feel free to jump in and help me out here if I lead anyone astray. It's not my necessarily biggest area of expertise, but we'll just talk through here. As you know, I'm sure, no doubt, the population for MassHealth really has expanded as a result of the ACA, and at the highest level, as we talked about on the previous slide, most people who are childless adults who are citizens and qualified aliens between 21 and 64 with income under 133% FPL are now in MassHealth, so that's a fairly large change from before. I'm sort of at the bottom of the slide, and I'm only calling that out because we previously talked about that on the slide before. Then going through just sort of the other big change, young adults aged 19 to 20 with incomes under 150% were not eligible for MassHealth previously and now will be under the ACA passage. All of the other categories that you see on this slide were eligible before the ACA and continue to be eligible. So that's children 0 to 18 under 300% FPL, pregnant women under 200% FPL, people with breast or cervical cancer under 250% FPL, and then disabled children and adults with higher incomes. As I'm sure you can appreciate, it's a real challenge to get people to sort of move between different sources of coverage. And so here at the Health Connector, we've been working obviously very closely with MassHealth to make sure that we minimize as much as we can any gaps in coverage for people who are transitioning between MassHealth and the Health Connector, or between other sort of subsidized programs and MassHealth or the Health Connector. So moving on to the next slide, looking at some of the non-group and small group market changes to the way plans are actually sold. So there's a couple of things here that are worth understanding, and you probably are familiar with many of these concepts, but I'll just talk through them. So first of all, actuarial value, or what we usually call AV, and metallic tiers. So AV is basically, it's pretty simple, although it sounds not so simple, but it's basically just a percentage of the total average cost for covered benefits that a plan will cover. So the way to think about this most simply is that if you have a plan with 60% AV, on average, that plan is going to cover 60% of all of the costs for the covered benefits that are covered by that health plan that are incurred by an individual or family. So basically, if you have a plan with 90% AV, or in the case of most of the Connector Care and ComCare plans, they're typically in the high 90s in AV. These plans are covering the vast majority of the cost for covered benefits that an individual or family would incur. So the ACA requires that all of the health plans in the non and small group markets fall into one of 4 AV ranges. So we